a fund committed to opening roads to employment for Connecticut families. My name is Betty Sugarman-Weintraub, and I am the Associate Director for Grant Making and Community Initiatives with the Liberty Bank Foundation. I'm joined by Elaine Zimmerman, Executive Director of the Connecticut Commission on Children, and Bill Villano, the President and CEO of the Workforce Alliance. In the next hour, Bill will provide an economic update outlining Connecticut's unique situation in attempting to regain pre-recession employment levels, and Elaine will provide information on the status of Connecticut's children in the face of the protracted economic recovery. To see how we might be able to support Connecticut families to move forward with their lives and gain meaningful employment, Bill and I will discuss the WorkPath Fund details. Before we get started, I would like to go over some housekeeping details regarding the webinar. During the formal presentation, we will mute the microphones to alleviate background noise. Upon completion of the presentation, we will unmute the microphones to begin taking questions. Please indicate your name and organization before stating your question. In addition, if you have a pressing question during the presentation or there is a logistical issue, please type in the area provided for questions, which is called chat, and we will answer your question or troubleshoot the logistical issue. Now I will turn the presentation over to Bill Villano to discuss Connecticut's economic update. Bill?
Thank you, Betty. You know, almost every day there's an article or a news story about the economy, unemployment, the sluggish recovery, or the struggles of those trying to find a job. What we're going to discuss in the next few slides is some of the reasons that it's been so hard for individuals to secure employment during this and after this most recent recession. You know, one thing that is clear in this recession, and actually in the recession of the past few decades, is that the unemployment is more structural in nature rather than cyclical, meaning that it isn't just a cycle, seasonal layoff, you know, cyclical unemployment. It is structural in nature, meaning that there are jobs that are going away and that are lost and will not be what individuals will return to when they secure employment. You know, in the 70s, the ratio of cyclical to structural unemployment was about 50-50. So you had about half the people laid off for some temporary reason to return to their jobs, and half needed to look for other jobs. And they were going away because of new technologies, because of greater productivity, or due to global competition. And that the workplace is changing, and people needed to get other training or other skills to be able to secure new employment. There's also another issue I would just add here, which economist Don Kleppersmith calls the substitution effect. And what he means by that is that employers are substituting capital for people. In this environment, when interest rates are so cheap and employers are investing in equipment, and in many cases that equipment replaces existing workers. This slide, I think, really kind of tells it all, and what it does is it aligns the most recent recession of 2007 with the 10 previous recessions going back to 1948. And it's clear that you can see that this recession is deeper and the recovery much longer than anything that we've experienced in the past. Even the line above that, which is kind of a brown line, is the recession of 2001, and working backwards, that black line is the recession of 1990. In both of those, they were longer than the last, and I think what we're seeing here is a disturbing trend of every new recession taking much, much longer to recover. You know, there's a lot of this talk about the long-term unemployed, and what this slide shows you is the last 3 recessions and looking at people who are considered long-term unemployed, and those are people who are unemployed for longer than 26 weeks, for longer than 6 months. You can see here, in non-recessionary periods, there's about 1 million people that are considered long-term unemployed. And in the last two recessions, that figure doubled to about 2 million people unemployed. But you can see in this current recession, or this most recent recession, we hit a peak of 6.7 million, which was 6 times the norm in non-recessionary periods and 3 times that of the previous recessions. Average unemployment, as you can see in the red highlighted letters there, is 36.5 weeks as of April. So you also probably hear people talk a lot about the official versus the unofficial unemployment rate. And what they fundamentally mean by that is the official unemployment rate are those people that are counted. And to be counted in the unemployment figures, you have to be available for and seeking full-time work. You have to be actively looking for a job. What is not counted in those numbers and what is considered the unofficial or the effective unemployment rate are those people who have given up looking for a job, called discouraged workers, those people who are considered marginally attached to the workforce, which means they really aren't actively looking for a job, but in the last couple of months they may have filled out one application or they may have attended a job fair or something like that, but really aren't considered an active job seeker. And the last group are the people who have taken part-time employment only because full-time employment isn't available to them. So it's essentially involuntary part-time employment. So when you consider those other 3 groups, you end up with 0.88 for every officially unemployed person. You end up with 0.88, you know, almost another full person who's unemployed in those 3 categories: marginally attached, discouraged, and part-time workers. So if you look at what's been happening again in this recession compared to those that have gone before, is the differential between the official and unofficial unemployment rate, or the effective unemployment rate, was about 4%. It's now up to about 7%. So if you look at the United States unemployment rate in April, it was 7.5%. When you apply this differential for the effective unemployment rate, you end up with 13.9%. You know, I mean, everything about this most recent recession is dramatically different from previous recessions, more negative, and much more difficult for people to return to the workplace. If you want to look at Connecticut, apply this differential, the official number of unemployed workers, and the SA means seasonally adjusted, in April was 147,000. When we apply the differential, the 0.88, discouraged workers, marginally attached workers, and part-time workers, it fully adds another 129,000, so that the effective unemployment rate, or the effective unemployment number in Connecticut, goes from 8%, which is the official rate in April, to 14.7%, or 276,000 people unemployed. Another thing that has happened since the recovery and this recession is the dramatic increase in temporary workers. Fully 1 in 6 of every new job is a temporary job. So even people who are fortunate enough to find employment often find themselves in a temporary job that you know, has a shorter duration and are again back out looking for another job. You can see, if you look at all jobs since the end of the recession, they've increased by 3.7%. If you look at the increase in the temporary jobs, they're up over 50%. This again is unlike any recovery in previous recessions. Taking a look at Connecticut, you know, specifically what happened in our job loss, this chart shows that during the first 2 years of the recession, for Connecticut, it started in March of 2008. So from March of 2008 to February of 2010, Connecticut lost 121,000 jobs. As you can see, it was a fairly precipitous drop over those 2 years. Since then, the recovery has been sluggish, has been uneven, and Connecticut has gained back a little over 57,000 of the jobs it lost, still down 63,000 jobs from our peak of March of 2008. Trying to figure out when Connecticut is going to recover fully and gain back the 121,000 jobs that we lost. This is a chart that shows in teal or green or whatever this color is, shows what has actually happened through April of 2013 and projecting out when we might recover if we add 2,000 jobs a month. And you can see that we are just into 2016 by this projection. What I can tell you is when we started looking at this a few years ago and making this similar projection, we were out of the recession and recovered. I mean, we recovered fully the 121,000 jobs by mid-2014. You can see now we're into 2016. We have not averaged, you know, if you look at the little text below the chart, thus far we've only averaged 1,500 jobs a month. We've had some months where we've clearly gained more than 2,000 jobs, but then we've suffered losses in succeeding months. So right now we are still looking at 2016, which is fully 8 years from when the recession started in Connecticut. This chart is a little busy. It just compares what happened in the job loss for the United States to Connecticut, the number of jobs we lost, the erosion rate. The critical point really is the last line there, what I would draw your attention to, which says percent gain recovery rate. And the country, the United States, has recovered 70% of their jobs, while Connecticut is still below 50% of the jobs that we've recovered of the jobs that we lost. This is a map of the 5 workforce investment areas in the state. There are 5 workforce boards, and these are the geographic regions that they cover. The Northwest with Danbury and Torrington. The North Central is Hartford. Southwest is Bridgeport, is a major town. South Central, which is my area, is New Haven, Meriden. And you can see the East, which geographically is about a third of the state, Norwich, New London, and that area. And I point this map out just because the next couple of slides are going to look at what is actually happening within these regions. If you look at this chart, it looks at the numbers of people that were unemployed, officially unemployed, in June of 2009, which is the official end of the recession. And it compares it to the most recent numbers we have for Connecticut, which is April 2013. And you can see the numbers increase, but more importantly, you can see the ratio of April 2013 to June 2009, and you can see that in all areas we are 85 to 90% of the numbers of unemployed workers in 2009 as compared to 2013. Some of the factors which influence this, I'm really not going to get into, is the reduction in the labor force. There are people who have dropped out of the labor force who are no longer looking for work. Absent those, the eastern part of this, the Eastern Workforce Board, has yet to regain any of the jobs that it's lost. It's just put people to work based on turnover and the churn, the natural churn that happens in the economy. But here we are, fully 4 years out from the official end of the recession, and in all 5 regions we are 85 to 90% of the number that were employed then are still unemployed. So if we look at these 5 regions and we look at the official unemployment rate in April of 2013, and we apply that differential, the 0.88 differential that includes marginal, discouraged, and temporary workers, you can see the significant difference in the effective unemployment rate from the official unemployment rate in all 5 of these regions. In closing, we just wanted to take a look at a couple of, some selected municipalities around the state and see what's happened there. So this first slide is the official unemployment rate. And as you would expect, municipalities like Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Meriden are higher unemployment in the urban areas. But what I want to talk about is also in the typical suburban areas. And 5 of these towns are in my region. I can talk a little bit more with a little bit more knowledge about those, especially if you look at the bottom. If you look at Guilford and Woodbridge, for example, in non-recessionary times, the unemployment rate there is about 1.5%, just basically the kind of normal turnover that you would see in a non-recessionary time. In the past few recessions, as you saw in the previous slide, that is maybe doubled, up to maybe 3.5%. Earlier in the recession, these towns had unemployment rates of 6, 7, and 8%. Never have seen that level of unemployment in these suburban towns. If you look at the next slide, you can see when we apply the effective unemployment rate to those, inner cities are now in the 20% range, 20% plus range, and even towns like Milford, Guilford, and Woodbridge in my area are now in and almost in double digits. And you can see other towns here, West Hartford, Manchester, towns that would never really show that level of unemployment are really showing that level of unemployment. I think one point I would say in closing too is the issue of the worker that's over 50. The good news for that group is that during this recession, their level of unemployment was lower than the population under 50. When the unemployment rate in Connecticut was 9% a couple of years ago, the unemployment rate for the over 50 population was about 6%. And that's the only good news, because once someone of that age group became unemployed, while the over 50 group makes up 35% of the workforce in Connecticut, when you looked at people who were on extended benefits or at exhausted benefits or were long-term 99ers, they were in the 45 to 50% range. So there's a cohort here that is having an extreme difficult time in getting back to work. Now I'd like to turn it over to Elaine Zimmerman.
Thank you, Bill. There's no greater risk to Connecticut's future than the adverse effects of this recession on children. When the recession began, we began to look nationally at the studies in relation to the recession to see what happens to children. And we were alarmed to learn that when children face a recession and fall into the rabbit hole of poverty, they don't come out of poverty. They stay in that rabbit hole, and they stay in that rabbit hole for years. So we then needed to see, well, how many children in our state were falling into poverty unexpectedly and quickly due to the recession. And lo and behold, the number when we began was approximately 35,000. People ask the question, and we talk a lot about children in poverty, but the real question is, what does that really mean? What are the outcomes of that? People tend to not know, and so I would like to share what we do know. And what we know is that children in poverty are more likely to have low birth weight, infectious disease, anemia, poor cognitive development, stunted growth, obesity, missed immunizations, and they are hungry, they are hungry, they are hungry. What we have heard over the last few years is the hidden secret of hunger all over this state in the urban, rural, and suburban areas. So as one child that sort of did me in at a hearing, a very brave kid who came and said, I concentrate each day on, and the kid, is an early adolescent, could say anything, concentrate on my studies, concentrate on girls, concentrate on basketball, and he said, I concentrate each day on not eating, and was able to say, what was in his family's refrigerator, which was, I think, milk and juice, and that was it. What we're seeing is a lot of kids leaving home because they want to help, so they are what one might consider a runaway, but they're leaving home because they want the parent to focus on the two younger children, and they know the cost they are in food, and so they disappear. The country has seen in this recession a dramatic increase in children leaving, who aren't leaving because they're having fights with their parents, but because of a false and endearing notion that they're going to help. There's also a profound cost to child poverty. Children in poverty are 3 times more likely to die during childhood, so there's no greater cost than life. You'll see that they are more likely to lack housing, health care, and they also clearly and across the board do less well in school than their peers who are not poor. We see definitely an impact on all school performance related to income. It's costly for business and for the consumer, so that even those who aren't all that interested in children but do care about the growth of our economy, not necessarily the growth of the child, every year a child spends in poverty costs our state about $12,000 in lost future productivity. And the Connecticut labor force is projected to lose as much as $1.1 billion in future productive capacity for every year that the current number of Connecticut children live in poverty. And I must say, we're not doing so well, because if you look at our numbers, in 2003 we were at 11%, in 2010 we're at 12.8%, and actually now we're near 13%. In 2003, for the 200% of the federal poverty level, our numbers were 23%, already very high. In 2010 it was at 26.8%, and now we are nearly at 30%. So the numbers are going up. You sort of want this to be an old story that we've dealt with, but unfortunately the news keeps showing that our child poverty rates are stunningly bad. First Focus in Washington found that 1 in 10 Connecticut children had at least one unemployed parent, and that nearly half of the home foreclosures in 2008 involved households with children. And we've all seen this, the number of people in the urban, rural, and suburban sectors who've lost their homes. And of course, once you have a child who's homeless, the homeless child experiences more stress, does not do as well in school, is prone to illness. Our homeless shelters have tripled in utilization. The utilization tends to be by people who are educated. We have more and more homeless shelters where the adult has a minimum of a high school degree, if not a few years in college. This is a quiet secret. The number of people who are living in shelters, hungry, if they're really successful, they're couch surfing, so they're not in a formal shelter, but they're going from one cousin to a friend's house. And the children are also doing this. So what happens is the child is no longer having the constancy of one place, and this affects where they go to school. Superintendent upon superintendent talks to me about what they're to do when they know that a child that was in their school has become homeless and is now living with auntie in the next town. Does the child then not only lose the house, lose the food, but also lose the school and lose the teacher? We're seeing this again and again in our state. Connecticut's overall standing among the states is deceptive because the extreme wealth of our state masks the poverty of others and certainly masks what's happening in our suburbs. Connecticut is the only state in which the real inflation-adjusted income of the poorest 20% of families has actually declined since the 1980s. It's declined by 17% instead of the national increase of 11%. And 1 in 5 families in our state is what's considered asset poor, which means that, and think about this with a child, that if you lost your job, the household's financial assets are so low that the family can't survive for 3 months if its income is interrupted. So there's one other secret, and then I'm going to close and transfer over to Betty, that the suburbs in our state are a quiet secret of poverty. Brookings has just come out with a study showing that our suburbs now compose over 1/3 of the nation's poor population, and this is certainly the case in our state. The anti-poverty infrastructure built over the past several decades doesn't fit this rapidly changing geography. The causes in our state are foreclosure and a struggling economy. And what Brookings cites, and part of what we're talking about today with the WorkPath Fund, is the need for financial resources and services in the suburbs. And we're certainly seeing thousands of people who are not eligible for the supports in our state, but who are now hungry and whose children are hungry. We've seen, you can judge that. We have school meal reports that show us the number of people who are using that and tells us who's facing unexpected poverty. And while the urban centers like Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport continue to have the highest rate of school meal eligibility, suburban communities, this fits what Bill's talking about, like Manchester and East Hartford, are trending upward, closer to the levels of Norwalk and Stamford. So, you know, when we make decisions that affect children, we have only one chance to get it right. There's no do-overs for childhood, and our state's in trouble right now.
Thank you, Bill and Elaine, for your informative presentations. Given the devastating impact that unemployment has had on Connecticut's children and their parents, many of us have wondered what we can do to affect any type of positive change. What we know is that there are many families that face one-time barriers to employment, that do not qualify for existing programs, and are struggling to try to break out of the unemployment or underemployment cycle. For this reason, the WorkPath Fund was established after years of meetings with providers and stakeholders. This fund attempts to support the parents that were literally slipping through the cracks, able to secure a job, but not able to start that job due to a barrier. Bill and I will now present the information about the WorkPath Fund. The idea for the fund was written into the 2010 Children in the Recession state legislation. The legislation noted that the possibility of a fund to support parents with housing, utilities, food, and employment should be considered. The most pressing out of all of these needs is employment. As people say, the best social service program is a job. As we know, and as has been stated by Bill and Elaine, time is of the essence. The unemployment figures continue to remain in the 8 to 9% range. As Bill also stated, the need is coming from throughout the state. It's not just in the larger cities, but it is firmly entrenched in the suburbs as well. We're also seeing through case management requests at the Connecticut one-stop centers, through 211 requests, through social service agencies and city and town social service departments, families, parents that are coming in and they're being told, sorry, there are no funds available for you because you don't meet the income eligibility. As you can see from the next slide, this shows from 2007 to 2010 that the number of parents that are underemployed or unemployed has actually doubled during that time frame. And the figures remain approximately the same now in 2013. But that's dramatic. If you can see from the visual here just how dramatic it is. Now, when we start talking about the WorkPath Fund, we want to talk about some of the eligibility guidelines. In order to be eligible for this fund, you would need to be a Connecticut resident with a dependent child or children age 18 or under living in your household. You need to be in assistance to attain, maintain, or retain employment. You also currently you cannot be able to fit within the guidelines for TANF, or which is Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, or Workforce Investment Act Fund. So in other words, currently the Connecticut Works One-Stop Centers have small supportive services funds. However, they are restricted to a small group of parents that meet these eligibility guidelines. They do not support, by and large, the formerly middle class that have exhausted all benefits, and potentially also the working poor that are underemployed. The eligibility will be determined at the Connecticut Works One-Stop Centers and will be based on income, family size, residence, etc. The income guidelines are 75% of Connecticut median income with flexibility in dire circumstances. The vast majority of the parents helped by WorkPath will have a job offer, but will not be able to start that job due to a one-time barrier. And let's talk about some of those barriers, some of the needs that are out there. We're talking about transportation, a car repair, a bus pass. Say you're a parent that has your certified nursing assistant license. You live in Meriden, but you've been offered a job at Massonicare, say, in Wallingford, and you have a $500 car repair. Well, the buses do not run on a regular basis and at the times that you need to be at work or come home from work. Therefore, you need the $500 to repair your car. However, you're using that $500 for your rent. So therefore, you have that one-time barrier. Sometimes it's just a bus pass. Anecdotally, the case managers at the one-stop centers have said sometimes it's just a bus pass for a month that will get somebody on their feet again. It can be work attire. It can be steel-toed work shoes. It can be uniforms. It can be business suits. These are additional costs that are built in that folks just don't have the additional money because that money is going for food. That money is going for rent. And so therefore, it's a hindrance and it's a barrier to their employment. It can be 1 to 2 months of child care just to be able to have those funds. Some of the child care centers are doing what landlords are doing, and you have to put down a security deposit of a month and pay the first month. So how do you make that happen if you just got your job offer? Sometimes it's work-related equipment. It can be tools. It can be nursing supplies. If you're a CNA, you have to have a watch. You have to have a stethoscope. You have to come with those tools. It can be state certification fees for a license. It can be a training course fee needed to qualify for employment. So these are some of the most common requests for assistance. Let's talk about the administration of the program. The One-Stop Career Centers case managers will be administering the program. There will be vendor payments of $250 to $1,000 approximately with no individual payments. So referencing back to the car repair, the $500 car repair, it will be paid to ABC Car Repair. It will not be paid to Sally Smith for the car repair. We're also talking about a tight time frame. We want to be able to get people to work quickly. They have their job offers. So the payout will be within 2 weeks of their appointment with a case manager. The grant awards, if you're going to be making a grant, would be made to a 501c3, Bill Volano's Workforce Alliance, which is one of the members of the Workforce Investment Boards throughout the state. And grants can be designated to a particular WIF. As Bill had pointed out, there are 5 regional WIFs in the state. No administration fees are going to be charged by the WIFs for WorkPath. All the funds raised will go directly to supporting parents' employment. Data will be collected and tracked on the central state database system. Currently, for parents that are eligible for TANF and for WIA, there is a database that the case managers log in information such as the person's home city, the type of job that they're getting, and 6-month follow-up. These types of fields will also be included with data, the amount that the person will be receiving in funds, the type and the amount of the payment, the job location, city, etc. Okay, let's discuss the goals. Right now, the goal is to raise $200,000 that would potentially support between 200 and 800 parents, depending on the size of the request. The expectation will be that 400 to 500 parents will be supported at a minimum. Additional funds raised will support more families in need. This fund is really a hand up versus a hand out. We know as funders that oftentimes we're getting the requests from the soup kitchens, from the food pantries, from the shelters. Those types of requests are like a bottomless pit. Money just keeps going into those funds, and there's still always a need at the other end, versus being able to give someone a job so that they don't need to go to the food pantry. As everyone has noted in earlier discussions, the amount of increase at the food pantries, the need has just gone up through the roof in the suburbs as well as in the inner city. So this isn't just an inner city issue once again. We plan to announce the creation of the fund in this fall, 2013, with a press conference with the Governor Malloy and all funder partners. A minimum of $100,000 will be needed for a press conference to be scheduled. To date, $40,000 has been raised since our original kickoff meeting at the end of January. So the funds started coming in February. So between February and May, we have raised $40,000. There are currently many pending grant requests. So we are extremely hopeful of the press conference in the fall and announcing at least $100,000. And obviously, if any of you are interested, we're certainly very interested in speaking with you further about participating in this. Let's talk about the process now. We would request that all funders might consider using the common application form. We know in some cases this may not be possible, but if it is possible, that would be great, because the Workforce Alliance has written the application and it is ready for distribution for all interested funders. Each application will obviously list the foundation and the amount that each entity specifies. We ask that a consideration of $5,000 and upwards, depending on the size of your foundation, is looked at, and there will be follow-up email correspondence with all interested funders. The partners that have been involved with bringing WorkPath to reality are Elaine's Connecticut Commission on Children, Bill, the Workforce Alliance, which is one of the, as we mentioned, workforce investment boards, our foundation, my foundation, Liberty Bank Foundation. United Way of Connecticut 211 info line has agreed to be the central call-in phone-in number. Their operators will assess eligibility in a few short questions and then refer parents onto their closest one-stop center. And as we know, there are one-stop centers located throughout the state. Cronin and Company has developed the WorkPath logo and tagline, as well as providing marketing and communication support. And the Connecticut Association of Family Service Agencies has also been involved in supporting this effort. Bill, in fact, has let me know that there are 18 different one-stop centers throughout the state, so therefore it will be close for anyone, depending on where they live, to be able to get to a one-stop center that is close to where their home is located. So that is the wrap-up on the fund. Now that Bill, Elaine, and I have spoken, we'd like to open up for any questions that you might all have. Okay. All right. You're all unmuted at this point. We'd ask that you might identify yourself and the name of your organization before you ask your question. Okay, so not hearing any questions, one of the things that we would like to point out about the data collection, and I'm going to turn that over to Bill to talk a little bit about what is done currently in data collection.
These are questions that we received in previous sessions. As Betty mentioned, we have a statewide system. We're actually developing a variation of it, which is called Efforts to Outcomes. Some of you may know that. It's a web-based platform. So when an individual to a Connecticut Works Career Center, they will be all the information, all their information, family size, residence, what type of service they got, what amount that they got, will be entered into the system so that we can report back to any funder how the dollars were used, and also can ensure that people are not going to different Connecticut Work Centers looking for the same service. It's a system. The Workplace, which is the workforce board in South Central, in the Bridgeport, Southwest rather, in the Bridgeport area, will be managing that, and my organization, Workforce Alliance, will be managing all the finances. All boards are 501c3s and have the capability certainly to manage these funds and to do the appropriate reporting.
Betty, would you tell us any questions that have come up in the last 2 weeks when you presented on this other places?
One of the questions that has come up is about the minimum gift size, and I know we are trying to reach the $100,000 goal, and we are asking that foundations consider $5,000 and upwards. If there's a situation where that cannot be looked at, then certainly, obviously, we are interested in any type of donation to this fund. However, we are asking so that we can reach that $100,000 goal. That's definitely one of the questions that's been coming up. I think that to Bill's point, I want to stress the integrity of the data collection and what Bill had referenced. We are going to be keeping very, very close tabs and information so that there cannot be a person that walks into Workforce Alliance in New Haven and then a week later decides that they're going to go down to Stamford and walk into one of the one-stop centers in Stamford and see if they might be able to access these types of funds. So once a person comes in, it will go onto the central database so that all the different workforce investment boards throughout the state will all be accessing that same database instead of one separate for themselves.
Although it's so unlikely that we're going to find people who are exploiting this fund, 211 taught us that the number of calls they were getting from people who had lost everything and who were asking for help and learning that they were not eligible for anything, those numbers were in the thousands. And so it's not likely that we have cheaters. It's much more likely that we're going to have lots of people just needing this fund.
Absolutely. That's a very key point, Elaine, and something that we're hearing over and over again. What we're hoping is that we're going to be able to support large amounts of people, but that's going to depend on how much is raised. We know that these barriers are existing. This is not something that is being made up. The case managers anecdotally are talking one from every different WIB throughout the state about the need for these types of funds and the fact that there are so many people that when they call 211 or when they go to their case manager, they're told that there's nothing available for them. There are no resources available. So that is something that is a key reason why it's a key reason why the WorkPath Fund was established in the first place.
So why don't we see if through this there's any questions from the listeners at this point, and otherwise you could let us know where people can access this information. Are there any further questions or any questions from those who've been listening? There's no question that is a silly question here.
Okay, thank you for participating in today's WorkPath webinar. We hope that you have found the information that we presented interesting and that you will consider participating in this exciting fund to get Connecticut parents back to work. Within the next few days, we will be posting the webinar and a 4-minute video highlighting how small funds have big impact on parents' lives and careers on the Connecticut Council for Philanthropy and the Connecticut Commission for Children websites. And today, it will be available on the Workforce Alliance website. In addition, I'll be reaching out to each of you to determine next steps. I want to be able to pass along the website addresses. Bill, for Workforce Alliance, it's www.workforcealliance.biz.
www.cga for Connecticut General Assembly, so www.cga.ep.gov/COC for Commission on Children.
And for the Connecticut Council for Philanthropy, it's www.ctphilanthropy.org. Once again, many thanks for participating and have a great day.